You are listening to Frog Talk, presented by Black Ribbon.
Welcome to another episode of Frog Talk. Today, we're exploring the intersection of psychology and business strategy and how understanding human behavior can transform both how we market to customers, but how we build organizational culture and engage employees as well. I'm joined by Rai Cornell, CEO and marketing psychology strategist at Cornell Content Marketing, with a unique background that combines 8 years as a corrections and substance abuse counselor with 18 years in psychology-driven marketing. Rai has developed the ELITE method, E-L-I-T-E, a revolutionary approach that uses powerful psychological frameworks like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the trans theoretical model, and positive psychology to help B2B companies get prospects 80 to 90% pre-sold before they ever speak with a sales rep. Hi, Rai. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I'd love to just start with your career transition.
Sure.
I want to hear a little bit about the background, but what was sort of the moment that made you realize that psychological principles you were using in corrections and counseling could actually revolutionize how businesses approach marketing and even organizational culture?
Yeah, I didn't see it for the longest time. So after I switched out of the mental health world, I kind of hid my background. So anytime someone would ask me about what's your educational background, what's your career background, I'd get a little embarrassed because there was this huge disconnect. And so one day I was talking to a potential client and they said, "So do you have degrees in marketing, communications, business? What's your educational background in?" And I kind of ashamedly was like, "No, actually, my background's in psychology. I have this degree and that one and that one." And I thought they were going to go, "Oh, okay, well, we're really looking for somebody who has a marketing degree." And instead, they leaned in and they said, "Oh, wow, that's really interesting. There's a lot of overlap between marketing and psychology." And so that just kind of broke open this whole new world of what was possible that I had never even considered.
When you say broke open this whole new world, how did you enter that world? What did that spark in you or ignite in you?
Yeah, it was kind of like that conversation gave me the permission to not have this hard line between my history and what I was trying to build. And as soon as that line was broken down, all of the parallels started to show up. It's kind of like, about that thing in your brain, the reticular activating formation, where you see an ant on the ground and you're like, "Oh, there's just one little ant." But then as soon as you see that ant, suddenly you see a dozen, and then you see more, and then the whole ground is crawling with ants. It's like that, where as soon as that was an inkling of a possibility, suddenly everything I had been studying for nearly a decade, I could just pick it up and lay it right on top of marketing strategy, and it lined up beautifully.
That's really cool. That just makes me think of when I started my master's program, because it was in design management and design thinking, and I had basically been in the field of graphic design and how that feeds into marketing and communications and branding and so on. But I never practiced the theory of design as a solution, as a process. And so when I was when I was learning about all the theories behind all the practice that I was implementing, it just kind of blew open my mind. And realizing that, the entire man-made world is a product of design was just making me so excited. And so it reminds me of that a little bit. So then how did you apply that? Were you able to apply that instantly? How did that change your perception of, your own work and the kind of work that you were going to do?
It was definitely an evolution. So I think it actually started with motivational interviewing. So when you're working with someone in a counselor-client relationship, if you tell them to do something, they're going to put that wall up and they're going to say, "No, don't tell me what to do. This is my life." But if you can ask them the right questions that lead them to the conclusions that make them feel like, "Oh, these changes are actually my idea," then suddenly they start having that intrinsic motivation they need to actually change their lives. And so that was kind of the first connection that I made between counseling and psychology and copywriting in particular. And then it kind of evolved over time when I was looking at the sales funnel. And first of all, a big chunk of my marketing career was in the subscription industry. And so I always thought it was strange that the sales funnel ended at the point of conversion when everyone always says it's far cheaper to keep a customer than to go win a new one. So why aren't we then carrying marketing and messaging in this relationship through to retention? So now suddenly the sales funnel is not a 4-stage process, it's a 5. And then looking at that kind of shifted my mentality into looking at marketing really as relationship building, which then allowed me to expand the marketing funnel even more into that stages of change model from trans theoretical.
Were you always into psychology? Like since you were little, how did you get into that?
Yeah, for me, understanding the way people think was always a necessity. So I had a pretty rough upbringing. Both my parents were police officers. My mom was actually a gangs detective, and my father was a patrol cop and then traffic. And it was a very violent, aggressive household that I grew up in. And understanding the things that would set, in particular, my mom off, that was critical to my survival. And so I was always thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of if I do this, she's going to do this, and then this, and then this. And so it was kind of something that was an adaptation that then became a fascination of, well, why do people do the things that they do? And, while my parents are locking people up, I'm over here empathizing with the people that they're putting in cuffs and in the back of the black and white and asking, well, why did that person do that? They can't all be bad people. There has to be some deeper motivation for the choices that we make. And that's really what set me down that path towards being a corrections counselor.
I'm pausing because I'm drawing parallels. My parents weren't police officers, but my international upbringing put me in front of all kinds of situations and environments and atmospheres, and I kind of developed the same thing. It was like a innate sort of astute observational skill where I was able
Yeah,
to see things before they happened. It was,
exactly.
yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly. And then you get to choose, right? Because your brain follows down that pathway of, okay, well, based on this pattern, if I do this, this is going to happen, then this, then that. I don't want that outcome. I want this outcome. So I have to trace it all the way back to this fork, choose this other response, and then navigate that way.
Some deep manipulation tactics.
Is it manipulation or is it just understanding the way humans think and behave and make decisions?
um, Manipulating the outcome or the input to get the outcome you want, or influencing the input to get the outcome you want. I used to make that joke in my design classes all the time because we talk about influence all the time. I was like, I think you mean manipulation.
Well, and that's the thing is a lot of people, when they hear that I have a psych background, particularly in corrections, one of the first things people always say is, oh, so do you know what I'm thinking right now? No, of course not. I haven't had a chance to see your thought patterns and the way you see the world. And it's not so much, I don't think it's so much about manipulation when your goal outcome is something mutually beneficial. So, in the context of growing up, it was, I just want to get through dinner in peace. And now it's okay, especially because I only work with B2B now, it's real businesses, real people with real problems, and real businesses, real people with real solutions. How can I help them find each other? And to me, that's a win win. That's not manipulation. It's sending people in the direction that they want to go and making that process, that experience, way more enjoyable along the way.
Absolutely. I appreciate the distinction. Let's get to your hook. I just want to dive right in. So The 80 to 90% pre-sold using your elite method. I know we've spoken before, and you're basically you're fighting the good fight for sales teams. Um, you want internal sales teams to be essentially equipped with what they need to close deals. So walk us through that. I want to get just to the meat of that.
Yeah. So a lot of people will ask, there are a million marketers out there. Why choose you? And I get all riled up when people ask me that question because ultimately, in my experience, most marketers don't do what marketing is supposed to do. That's the difference. In my opinion, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, marketing's job is to not just get leads. That's a band-aid solution. That's like a friend of mine gave me this analogy the other day. So this is not my original idea. This is his, but he said, it's kind of like when someone goes to a personal trainer and they say, I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks. Okay, that's crazy. And maybe that trainer puts you on this really rigorous workout plan. And by the end of the 2 weeks, you haven't lost a pound. You don't even look or feel better. Well, why? Because you're still eating like crap. You're not sleeping properly. You've got all these other factors that are not being factored in to your goal outcome. It's the same thing when companies say, I want leads, I want leads, I want leads. You're not looking at all the other contributing factors and levers that you have to pull to get that goal outcome and not shoot yourself in the foot later on. So when companies are doing all these cold outbound tactics that are borderline harassment, it's just going to screw you up in the future. Nobody's going to want to work with your brand. And I know you get this because you're the culture branding guy. You try to build these businesses that look and feel good from the inside and the outside. So when I talk about getting leads 80 to 90% pre-sold, that's marketing's job. It's not just about getting the leads, but it's also about building that relationship, helping them make an educated decision, and setting up that successful handoff to sales so that it doesn't feel like you just took an unexpected drop step into someone's sunken living room and you're being handed off to someone else and it just feels like a totally different experience.
And first of all, I love that you're just like you're an ally to the sales team, because it's so interesting to me how often sales and marketing don't even talk. It's crazy to me because they are dependent on each other. Not to mention that, whenever things sort of hit the fan at organizations and companies, big or small, I mean, sales gets blamed, marketing gets blamed. And it is marketing's job to sort of pre-qualify who's coming to the door, because at the end of the day, I have this analogy where I say if marketing is your invitation and your customer is your guest, then your brand is your party. And
I like that one.
the piece that's missing there is the greeter.
Mm-hmm.
The greeter is your sales guy, is your sales team. So the invitation has to hit the right audience, and then the invitation has to match the party so that when people show up, they're at the right place. But then there has to be a greeter there that softens the blow for them
and guides them into the right part of the party that's actually going to give them a good time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So what are the psychological principles, psychological concepts and models that you're applying to achieve that pre-sell on that journey?
So the first thing, and this is true not just in psychology, but really in any relationship building, it's just psychology gives us fancy names for it, is coming to a common ground with the person that you're trying to connect with. And marketing tends to be seen as this creative, fluffy thing, branding too. I'm sure you get this all the time where people think, oh, it's just logos and colors and pretty pictures that you're putting up on Instagram and LinkedIn, whatever. That's not the case. You actually need to have a system for how you're designing what you're going to be putting out, both visually and verbally. And so I like to use the cognitive behavioral therapy triangle to first establish that common ground and then choose exactly which next step we're going to take people on. So, for example, first of all, cognitive behavioral therapy triangle, it's the idea that your thoughts drive your emotions, which then drive your behaviors. And your behaviors affect your experience of the world, which then elicit new thoughts about the world, which elicit new emotions, which then elicit new behaviors. And so it goes around and around and around, kind of like this recycling symbol triangle. And when you look at it that way, sometimes people go, okay, well, that seems hopeless. Where am I supposed to break into that? Well, first you have to intercept the thought. So you have to think about what's the thought that someone's thinking that is actually counterproductive to us forming a relationship. So an example I like to give is I worked with a cybersecurity and MSP company for a long while, and they thought, oh, well, nobody really takes cybersecurity seriously. They just think, oh, this is never going to happen to me. So that's the thought that you need to intercept. You think a breach is never going to happen to you. Maybe you think your company's too small. Maybe you think you don't have anything worthwhile for stealing or ransoming. You have to intercept that thought and meet them on that common ground. Then you have to introduce a new thought if you're going to elicit a new emotion, which elicits a new behavior. So the new thought might be, well, actually, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen to you, it's a matter of when. And you might give statistics showing how many small businesses are affected by ransomware or phishing. And then you elicit a new emotion by saying, hey, it's not hopeless. You can actually be protected pretty easily. Here's how. And then you lead them to more information. So that's where you can kind of intercept that and introduce a new triangle into the mix in your marketing.
Is that the root of your elite method?
No. So the elite method is really a process for marketing. And a lot of marketers, they just focus on the implementation, and that's the middle part. So the whole process, ELITE, is examine, learn, implement, transform, enhance. And it's really not that revolutionary in the sense of anything new. It's just a matter of I have a very systematic approach for guiding people through it when they only ever look at maybe the implementation and transform bits, and they're not looking at the whole picture. So when companies are wondering, why is my marketing not working? Why did we run this campaign, get zero ROI on it, and then just move on to the next? When you have a gold mine of data that you can learn from, pull forward, and then do better next time. Or in the case of with our conversation about the sales reps have such deep insight. They are kings and queens of reading people and steering conversations and anticipating questions. You need that information. So if you can establish those feedback loops between sales and marketing and customer service and marketing and pull those insights to the front, whether it's in the form of problems to solve, questions to answer, even just single words to use to tap into that empathy, then your marketing is going to have that J curve of improvement month over month. So the elite process is really that complete journey of what it takes to build a successful marketing engine. Embedded within that are the stages of change from trans-theoretical model, the cognitive behavioral therapy triangle, operant conditioning, things like that.
I just love your passion for it. Most marketers are not communications people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not communications strategists.
Right.
They're performance marketers and they're tacticians. Brand strategists are communications people. And so we tend to butt heads with marketers often. They're, put it bluntly, they're non-believers. They just don't see the value in, which is crazy to me. And so the greatest irony for me when it comes to quote non-believers of branding is, being able to explain the fact that good design is never noticed. Like you're literally living through brand strategies every millisecond of the day.
Yep.
Everyone experiences branding all the time.
Yeah.
All you would literally have to be naked in a jungle with no contact with human society for you to not experience branding.
Yeah.
And then if you want to like really get philosophical about it, even there you're experiencing branding, because brand is just a gut feeling about something.
Yep.
And so nature's branding is impacting how you feel. So it's always really funny to me, actually. It's comical because we are truly experiencing it all the time. And if you took a second and just self-reflected on your day, just one day of your life, and really dug into what is actually happening at every single moment of my day, from the second I wake up, to the first smell I smell, to the first sound I hear, to the feeling I have on my pillow, on my bed, to the air in the room. It's it's all coming from a product that was designed for you to be in that exact specific moment.
Yeah. It always boggles my mind when I hear someone say, oh, we don't really see the value in branding or in doing a rebrand right now. In order for branding to not have any value, we would need to live in a completely sterile, judgment free society. Branding relies on judgment. And so if your website is 12 years out of date and you're like, oh, brand doesn't really matter, that's not how we get clients. Well, still, when people come to your website, they're judging you, good or bad. And that's because of your brand. It's because of the visuals that they see and the verbals that they internalize. They're deciding whether or not you're good enough for them.
We by nature, we inherently categorize things. That's how we
Yeah,
make sense of the world.
we
I
have
mean,
to.
it's how we've always made sense of the world. Everything is categorized. Everything is labeled with something. Everything has a tag on it. And it's how language is built.
Mm-hmm.
Language is built to associate things with certain words and symbols and so on, so that we can communicate about them, so we can understand them. I mean, when people get confused, it's, just make it make sense. Like, put this thing over here, and then everyone relaxes. Like, okay, got it. And now we can get on with our lives. And that's what branding is. And when I talk about, and what you're doing is essentially creating the behavioral patterns that sit on top of communication frameworks in order to elicit the responses that you're talking about, which is ultimately your brand. The response is your brand. And when I define brand, for example, I'll give interns some grace, but like when I speak with interns or anyone really, and I ask them, define brand for me, um, they sort of often they hover around it, but they can't quite nail it, or they're just off. Um, it's rare that they just land on it's a gut feeling about something. And so I ask, if I always say, we don't create brands. No one, like, I'm not so arrogant to say that I create a brand. I'm a brand strategist. I create the plan around which experiences are created to elicit the responses that I want, which is the brand that I want. It's the feeling that I want people to have when they interact with me or an organization or whatever. So I ask, if you have a company, but no one knows about it, do you have a brand? And every
It's
time I do
like,
that, people are
does the
like,
tree fall
oh,
in the forest? Do you hear it? Does it make a sound? Yeah, exactly. And to your point, especially about most marketers being performance marketers, they're focused on driving a particular behavior. And I go back to the CBT triangle a lot because cognitive behavioral therapy is something that a lot of people are familiar with. And so if you think about that triangle, if you're, let's say, running ads or you're focused on some kind of mechanism first strategy, like email marketing, whatever the case may be, cold outreach, you are focusing on 1/3 of the whole picture. Brand, in particular, to your point, is the other two pillars of that triangle. It's the thoughts and the emotions. And you need to make sure that for the particular audience that you're trying to reach, for the particular type of relationship you're trying to ignite, that those thoughts and emotions are productive on both sides. Because that's the only way you're going to get to the behaviors. So you can't just drive CTAs. That's going to be a losing battle.
I want to focus, I want to go internal. So you also apply the same sort of concepts to organizational culture and employee engagement and so on. Is that, what are the similarities between the two? How do you apply the same models to, for example, pre-sell employees on company culture and values, or prospective employees even?
It's a lot of this. I mean, when you're trying to attract in the right employees and create a company culture, which a culture doesn't exist without people. So, in order to build a culture, you have to gradually add people to it. And it's the sum and the interaction of all of those parts that equals your culture. And so, if you're trying to attract in the right parts, you're just doing marketing. It's the exact same thing. Marketing is just communications and relationship building, but for a very different purpose. So, the purpose of that sort of relationship is join us, work with us, row your boat in the same direction that we're rowing. And so you still have to think about all the same things. What does this person actually want? What are the pains that they're up against? What's the political and socioeconomic climate right now? What relief can we give them? What are the valuable things that we can say that we will offer and actually stand by in order to make them feel like this is a place that not only they want to apply for, but they would want to stay in for a long time? Because I'm sure you know, employee turnover and the instability of the job market is insane right now.
Yes, employees want, like anybody else, anyone wants, people just want to feel human, man. They just
Yeah.
want to be seen as human. They want to know that people acknowledge them for who they are. One
Yeah.
thing that's often ignored in employee hiring processes and onboarding processes and talent strategy and so on is lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Just lifestyle. You can, we talk about the generational gap constantly, which is, it bears mentioning because it's relevant. We've never seen a larger generational gap in modern history in the workplace. We literally have 70 years between the oldest workers and the youngest. You have board members who are 90 years old, and then you have entry level workers who are 20 years old,
Yeah.
and they cannot speak to each other.
Right.
But on top of that, you also have lifestyle, and there's somewhere within a 40-year range where your lifestyles collide. You can be an older, whatever, millennial, for example, and be a single man whose work is his life. He doesn't have kids, he doesn't have a family, he doesn't even have a dog, and work is his life. And then you have a younger person who's also single, and work is their life. They might have more of a social life or something, but basically, these two people have more in common than a family man the same age as the older millennial. And like that's something that often needs to be taken into consideration when you think about employee well-being and employee wellness, I mean engagement, and how an organization will see this person as fitting into this ecosystem because of who they are. Their motivations will be different, their discipline will be different, their work ethic will be different. Everything changes because their lifestyle is different. So their personal motivations are different. And that's something that's often ignored. And I feel like your model actually speaks to that because you're going that deep. You're thinking about what you're describing as the initial thought. What is the either the pain point or the realization or the reality in someone's mind when they're looking for work? Where is the resistance coming from? Why do they bail in the first 90 days?
Exactly. And the reason I harp on psychology as the critical piece of marketing so much now is There are millions of mechanisms that you can deploy in marketing. We've got AI now. We've got all these automation tools. We've got so many different social media platforms out there. We have so many different channels and ways of reaching people. But that doesn't really matter until you figure out the right message and how you should deliver it. And that doesn't even really matter until you figure out the right motivation for why am I reaching out to this person and why would they even be interested in listening. And to your point, particularly about recruiting and hiring, you also have to look at not just the individual psychology of who wants this role, who do we want to attract in, but you also have to look at the collective psychology of society, or if you're in a particular geographical region, what's the collective psychology of that town or city? Because now, today, people value very different things than they did in our parents' generation. Our parents' generation, it was all about safety and stability and security and benefits. Now it's about fulfillment and enjoyment and freedom. Very different values, which means you have to speak to those needs in a very different way.
Joy and happiness are not the same thing either, right? You have one that is fleeting and one that is sustainable, one that is rooted in instant gratification, the other that is rooted in long-term fulfillment. And it's often, you know this better than I do, it's often proven that fulfillment, a joy is derived from fulfillment, from feeling fulfilled, from feeling how do you feel fulfilled? Through being a contributing factor, to feeling seen, to feeling valued for what you do, to getting feedback for what you do, and becoming better at what you do. And whatever you do is whatever you do. But feeling like it actually did something, like it made a difference, going to bed and being like, I had a productive day. You might have a bad day and be pissed off, but the next day you'll be fine because it's still part of this journey. And that's something that's often missed. That's where like generational gaps still become a relevant conversation because,
Yeah.
older managers, more traditional managers, and so on. Many of whom I don't want to be like absolutist here because many of them are actually getting with the program really well, and I commend them for it because behavioral change is very difficult, and they're just getting behind it. And Gen Z, God bless them, are ruffling all the feathers to make that happen.
Yeah.
And to your point, people are seeking enjoyment of life experiences and so on. But there's a place where um, there's still a inability to create, again, not across the board, but in general, an inability to create a sense of desired loyalty from an employee, from your workforce, to where they're actually reliable. Because the danger right now is, you're speaking about a flaky, sort of unreliable workforce that
Yeah.
is untrustworthy, and it's creating issues because they're fleeting.
But we have to ask why. Why are they fleeting? And that's why I like the word fulfillment that you used earlier, because back in the day, our parents' generation, fulfillment meant I have a check, I have money in the bank, I can put food on the table. That was enough. That's not the case anymore. Now people define fulfillment and they have all these different expectations of one thing, which is work. They want that sense of purpose and contribution. They want to feel like the company that they're working for cares about their health and their well being. And they want opportunities to improve their health and well being. They want camaraderie and they want relationships and social opportunities there. They want opportunities to expand their mind and grow their skill sets and develop themselves personally. So now you have all of these different buckets that all contribute to an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. And it's now the employer's responsibility, if they want to keep their workforce, to address all of those buckets, not just here's a paycheck so you can feed your family.
Right. And I really I appreciate that you went down that road because I was just having this conversation with someone else, and I often have this conversation. Um, when you talk about the company ladder, there are, and it goes back to personality, lifestyle, ingrained motivations, and so on, just character. Some people, I inherently believe that forever, some people will inherently not care about like the values of a company. They just don't
Mhm.
care. They couldn't care
Transactional.
less. Yeah, and they're just happy they have a job, or they're taking home a paycheck, or excuse me, they're wired a different way where they want they don't want the soft stuff. They want the hard stuff. They want to be challenged. They like
Mhm.
being spoken to in a rugged sort of way and being able to speak in a rugged sort of way and so on. And that goes back to what you and I keep talking about is understanding who you're talking to. Like you can have that kind of culture and it can still be healthy. It doesn't mean it's toxic. As long as it's still rooted in a collective belief system, then it works. I mean, you can use the military as an example. There are good and bad examples of the military, but the good examples still include very disciplined, very rigid structures um, that aren't necessarily abusive. And in those cases, one thing that I lean into all the time because I get pushback on, well, what about those people? When you talk about building these culture brands and these programs, it feels so soft all the time. And then I talk about the fact that I'm actually operationalizing brand and culture through systems so that the values that you live by are actually being felt at every given touch point. And so what happens there? The person who doesn't care about values and their purpose in line with this company and purpose and job connection and all that, they couldn't care less. And that's fine. As long as you're doing the work, it doesn't really matter. But what will change is their mood. That will absolutely change. And they won't even realize why. They'll just suddenly be having better days. And that will permeate into their home life, into their communities, and so on. And that's what I find fascinating because even those who aren't, in just directly proactively thinking about this stuff still get indirectly impacted by those kinds of changes in a very cool way.
Yeah. And it's that impact, it's that interaction that I think often overwhelms people. So, one of the questions that I hear all the time from companies that I work with is, well, our competitors doing this and our other competitors doing that, and this person over there is doing this. Should we be doing all of these things? No, absolutely not. That's a way for you to overwhelm yourself and get stuck in the granular and not have any big picture vision that you're driving it all towards. And so that's why, I really like your whole inside, outside in model, because when you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to design a strategy that's going to work to get me towards my goals without being manipulative or without bombarding people with cold outreach? You have to first think about, what do you really want to attract in? And that's really the first part of my whole process. That's the examine part. Examine who you are on the inside as a company. What is your brand? What do you stand for? What are you trying to sell? That's another big thing. Is I've worked with companies where marketing is pushing this service, sales is always trying to close these deals, and then every time they do, customer service and service delivery cringe because they're like, we're not set up to actually deliver that at scale. So you guys are screwing us over every 2 weeks. So you have to really take that good hard look at, who are we? What do we want? And then you have to stop worrying about pleasing everybody, because you can't and you don't want to. That's not the point. The point is for you to let your value shine brighter so that it acts as that beacon to attract in the people who value the same things. And it works for employees and customers.
Um, exactly. Man, we do not have enough time. I want to keep talking and talking about all this. We can go deeper and deeper. We should do a part two because we are running out of time here. But I just wanted to ask, with respect to your philosophy, psychological model-backed marketing to really get at the root of motivations, motives, truthful thought processes, and so on with both employees and customers. If you had to give business owners one piece of advice to really just for that to click, what would it be?
I think nowadays we all look external to ourselves for all the answers. And the thing that I love about psychology driven marketing is every single time I correct something that one of my clients is doing and I put that psychological spin on it, they have this aha moment of, oh, yeah, because I hate when companies market at me with the same tactics that we're using. And then I twist it and say, well, why don't we just, follow that golden rule of treat others the way you want to be treated? How does that feel? And so it's like we've been programmed to do all these things that are actually counterproductive to our growth because we see all these other people doing these outlandish, ridiculous, and offensive things. So just don't do that. Just do the things that actually feel good to you and trust yourself so that you can actually create marketing that if you were on the receiving end of it, you would enjoy experiencing that.
Good advice. Ray, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
I'm really only on LinkedIn. Don't try and message me on Facebook or Instagram. I hate those platforms. I'm on LinkedIn, Rai Cornell. My first name is spelled kind of weird. It's RAI. And then I'm also at cornellcontentmarketing.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure. I really think we should do a part 2 because that was definitely not enough time.
Awesome.
But I will see you next time.
Perfect.